You think you know someone, but what if everything you thought was true was a lie? Amelia Blackwell had always believed in her marriage. She was the devoted wife, the perfect mother-to-be, and the woman who supported her husband's empire without question. But all of that shattered the moment Ethan, her husband, walked out the door. He left her, 8 months pregnant, with nothing but empty promises and a cold, lifeless mansion to call home. And he did it for her, Scarlett Monroe, a stunning model with eyes full of ambition and a heart full of deception. Amelia's world turned upside down. As she stood in the empty house, her hand pressed protectively against her growing belly, a flood of emotions surged within her: betrayal, pain, anger. But as she gazed out the window, one thing became crystal clear: she would not stay down. Ethan had made a grave mistake, and Amelia was going to make him regret it. The bitterness of his betrayal began to burn inside her, a fire that would fuel everything she would become in the months to come. With her father's resources and a newfound strength, Amelia began to gather the pieces of her life that Ethan had shattered. She wasn't just going to move on, she was going to build a future, one that would make Ethan wish he had never walked away. The months passed quickly as Amelia focused on one goal: not only surviving but thriving. Her pregnancy wasn't a burden, it was a badge of honor, proof that she was stronger than anyone had ever given her credit for. She made a plan. She wasn't just carrying his child, she was carrying her revenge. When the time came, she would make sure that Ethan knew exactly what he had lost. But what Ethan didn't know was that Amelia's departure wasn't just a betrayal, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Her family was wealthy, yes, but they had power too. Her father, a self-made billionaire, had a network that spanned industries, connections that would make anyone second-guess their choices. And Amelia was prepared to use it. As the months went by, Amelia's transformation was undeniable. Her days of being the quiet, loyal wife were over. Now, she was a woman on a mission. She started making decisions that would change everything. With each passing day, she became more confident, more determined. Her once passive role in the marriage now became a thing of the past. Amelia was taking back control. By the time she gave birth to twins, Ethan had no idea what he was about to face. He thought he could discard her, that he could walk away with no consequences. But Amelia wasn't just any woman. She was someone who had been underestimated for far too long. And now, with her 2 beautiful twin boys, she was ready to show Ethan just how wrong he was. Amelia's transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. The days turned into weeks, and soon, she found herself standing in front of a mirror, no longer seeing the woman she once was. Gone was the timid, heartbroken wife. In her place stood someone powerful, confident, and unwavering. She had made the decision to rebuild not only for herself but for the 2 little lives she now held in her arms. The twins, Jake and James, were the constant reminder that her future was no longer tied to Ethan, her former husband. They were her future, and she would do whatever it took to protect them. The day she gave birth to them was the day her life began anew. Amelia spent sleepless nights learning how to navigate her new life, juggling the role of mother with the pressure of rebuilding her fortune. Her father, Richard Anderson, had always been a towering figure in the business world, but now, he became her closest ally. He offered her everything she could ever need, not just in terms of wealth, but in connections, resources, and the wisdom that came with decades of experience. It wasn't long before Amelia started to understand the full extent of her father's empire. With his guidance, she quickly realized that she didn't need to rely on Ethan's money or reputation. She had her own. By the time the twins were 6 months old, Amelia was already a force to be reckoned with. She was no longer a passive participant in her own life. She had made her own decisions, and now, she was building her future. Amelia wasn't just thinking about revenge, she was thinking about legacy. She understood that the path she was walking would lead her not only to a place of personal triumph, but also to a future where her children would grow up in a world that would never look down on them. She wasn't going to be a footnote in Ethan's life, she was going to be the one writing the chapters. While Ethan was busy flaunting his new relationship with Scarlett, Amelia was quietly making her moves behind the scenes. She met with top lawyers, real estate moguls, and financial advisors. She was assembling a team that would help her gain back what she was owed, and more. One day, while Ethan and Scarlett were vacationing in the Caribbean, Amelia sat in her office, going over the final details of a deal that would change everything. She had just signed an agreement with one of the largest tech companies in the world to invest in her growing portfolio. This was only the beginning. Amelia knew that Ethan had never seen her as more than a simple housewife. He had thought she was nothing without him. But he was wrong. She had always been more than that. Now, she was about to prove it. Ethan wouldn't know what hit him. Amelia's rise wasn't going to be a quiet one. When the time came, she would confront him, and he would see just how much he had underestimated her. But for now, she focused on the twins. They were her world, and everything she did was for them. Her revenge was taking shape, but it wasn't just about punishing Ethan. It was about showing him that his actions had consequences. The twins were the key to everything. She wasn't going to let them grow up in the shadow of their father's betrayal. They would have everything he had promised her, and more. And when they grew older, they would understand the strength it took to build the life they now had. Amelia smiled as she looked at the twins, sleeping peacefully in their crib. She knew that her revenge wasn't just about money or power. It was about reclaiming her life, her future, and most importantly, her children's future. Amelia stood by the large windows of her penthouse, looking out over the sprawling cityscape. The world seemed so far away from where she once stood. Her life, her future, was no longer a matter of chance or fate. It was now in her hands. The twins, Jake and James, were asleep in their nursery, the soft hum of the city below providing a calm backdrop. It had been 9 months since Ethan had walked out of their lives, but every single day, every moment since, had been a step towards reclaiming what was rightfully hers. She had come a long way from that empty mansion, the place where she first learned that everything she had believed in had been nothing but a lie. The deal with the tech company had been a huge breakthrough, but Amelia wasn't finished yet. Her next step was clear. She would ensure that Ethan never got the chance to control her or their children ever again. Amelia had kept a low profile in the public eye. She hadn't needed the limelight. Her focus had been on creating a foundation for her family, a strong, unshakable future. But that was all about to change. The day had finally come when Amelia would confront Ethan. The months of carefully planning, building her empire, and ensuring her children's future had all led to this moment. She had turned her grief into power, her pain into strength. And now, with everything in place, she was ready to face him. Ethan had built a reputation as a powerful man, a billionaire who thought he could control every aspect of his world. He had underestimated Amelia, believing she would crumble under the pressure. What he didn't know was that the woman he had left behind was far more capable than he had ever imagined. Amelia had already secured a seat at the table with the most influential people in the business world. With her father's connections and her own drive, she had carved out a path that was all her own. She wasn't relying on anyone but herself. As Amelia prepared for the meeting, she couldn't help but think about the day Ethan had left. How he had walked out of the door, leaving her pregnant and alone. At that moment, she had been broken, shattered by his betrayal. But now, she saw it for what it truly was, a blessing in disguise. She had grown stronger, more resilient, and she would make sure Ethan knew just how wrong he was to underestimate her. The time had come to take back control of her life. Amelia had one goal in mind, to ensure that Ethan would never forget what he had lost. She had been his wife, but she was so much more than that. She was a mother, a businesswoman, and now, the woman who would shape her own destiny. The meeting with Ethan was set for the following week. Amelia had no intention of confronting him with anger or bitterness. She would face him with grace and poise. The kind of strength that came from knowing her worth and the value of what she had built. Ethan would have no choice but to recognize her. The moment was fast approaching, and Amelia knew that the days of being overlooked, of being cast aside, were finally behind her. She had done the work, she had sacrificed, and now it was time for her to take her place at the top. As she looked at her twins, she knew that whatever happened next, they would be just fine. She had already secured their future. And as for Ethan, he would soon learn that when you leave a woman like Amelia Blackwell, you make a powerful enemy. Amelia sat in her office, her fingers lightly tapping on the mahogany desk. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the city below. The twins were with their nanny, and this rare moment of solitude gave her time to think, to reflect on everything that had led her to this point. She had worked tirelessly to build her empire, to reclaim her life after Ethan had walked out. She was no longer just the woman he had left behind. She had become someone new, someone he would have never imagined. The day of the meeting with Ethan was rapidly approaching, and with it, the culmination of all her efforts. Amelia knew that it wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure Ethan understood that his actions had consequences. He had thrown away everything he had built with her, everything they had shared, and now he would face the reality of what he had lost. The moment she stepped into that room with him, she would show him that she was no longer the vulnerable, heartbroken woman she once was. She was stronger, smarter, and more powerful than he had ever given her credit for. The twins had given her a new sense of purpose, a new reason to fight. They were the future, and she was going to make sure they grew up with everything they deserved, without ever having to face the shame of their father's abandonment. Amelia had spent the past several months ensuring that the business deals she had worked on were in place. Her portfolio had grown exponentially, and the tech deal had put her on the map in ways she never imagined possible. But it wasn't just about business success. Amelia had also been preparing for the inevitable encounter with Ethan, the moment when she would face him in person and let him see how far she had come. As she reviewed her notes for the upcoming meeting, her thoughts drifted to Ethan. The man she had once loved, the man who had promised to stand by her through thick and thin. She remembered the way he had looked at her with such admiration, the way he had made her feel like she was his world. But it had all been a lie. His love had been conditional, and when things got difficult, he had chosen the easy way out. But Amelia wasn't like him. She had chosen to rise from the ashes of their failed marriage, to create something for herself, something that no one could take away. The meeting with Ethan would not be about pleading for his attention or affection. It would be about showing him that she had moved on, that she no longer needed him. She was more than capable of standing on her own 2 feet, and the life she was building for herself and her children was far beyond anything Ethan could have ever offered. Amelia knew that when she walked into that meeting, Ethan would see a woman he didn't recognize. He would see a woman who had taken control of her life, a woman who was not afraid to take what was hers. And when the meeting ended, Ethan would know that he had lost far more than just a wife. He had lost the future he had taken for granted, the future that Amelia had fought so hard to build. Amelia was ready. The time had come to confront her past, to face the man who had hurt her, and to show him that her strength was not just a reflection of her pain, it was the foundation of her success. The day of the meeting with Ethan had finally arrived. Amelia stood outside the sleek, modern office building, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. It was as if time had slowed down. She had waited for this moment for so long, and now it was here. The years of pain, heartbreak, and loss were all behind her. Today was about reclaiming her power, showing Ethan just how much she had grown. As she entered the elevator, the soft chime of the floor numbers rising made her think back to the days when she had been married to Ethan. She had been so caught up in the illusion of their perfect life, blind to the cracks that had slowly formed beneath the surface. But now, she saw clearly. The man she had loved was a shadow of the man she had once believed him to be. The doors of the elevator opened with a soft whoosh, and Amelia stepped out into the luxurious office lobby. The receptionist gave her a polite smile, but Amelia barely registered the gesture. Her focus was razor-sharp, honed in on the task ahead. She was no longer the wife who waited at home, helpless and abandoned. She was a businesswoman, a mother, and a force to be reckoned with. As she walked through the corridor toward Ethan's office, she couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over her. She had spent so many sleepless nights preparing for this moment, reading through contracts, negotiating deals, and building her own empire. She was ready for whatever Ethan was about to throw her way. When she finally reached his office, she paused for a brief moment. The door was closed, but she could hear voices inside. Ethan's voice was unmistakable. He had always had that confident, commanding tone that made people listen. But now, she wasn't interested in listening to him. She wasn't there to beg for his approval or his affection. She was there to show him that she no longer needed him. Amelia knocked once, her hand steady. The door opened almost immediately, and Ethan stood there, looking exactly as she remembered, tall, well-dressed, and impeccably groomed. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, but he quickly masked his surprise with a forced smile. "Amelia," he said, his voice a little too smooth. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm sure you didn't," Amelia replied, her tone calm but firm. She stepped into the office, her gaze meeting his. She could see the slight shift in his posture as he tried to assess her. The last time they had been in the same room, he had dismissed her like she was nothing. But now, she was different. She was someone who had built something for herself, someone who had moved on from the past. She had taken the pieces of her broken life and turned them into something unshakable. "You look well," Ethan said, a hint of uncertainty creeping into his voice. Amelia smiled politely, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm doing better than I've ever done," she said. She could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes, but she didn't care. It was too late for apologies, too late for regret. The truth was, he had made his choices, and now she was going to make hers. "I've come here today to show you that I don't need you." "I never did," Amelia continued, her voice steady and unyielding. Ethan looked taken aback, but he quickly recovered. "Amelia, No, Ethan," she interrupted, her eyes cold. "You don't get to explain yourself. You walked away from me, from our family, and now I've built something far beyond what you could ever offer. I'm stronger than you ever thought possible." There was a long silence between them, and for the first time, Ethan didn't seem to know what to say. Amelia stood tall, her heart pounding, but not from fear. She was no longer afraid of him. She had faced her demons and come out the other side. Now, she was ready to take what was hers. "I have a future, Ethan," Amelia said, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "And you're not a part of it." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Amelia could see the shift in Ethan's expression. The man who had once held all the power was now looking at her, as if he was seeing her for the first time. The man who had walked away from her was finally realizing that she was never just a wife to be discarded. She was someone to be reckoned with. And as Amelia turned to leave the office, she knew she had done exactly what she had set out to do. She had taken back control of her life. Amelia walked out of Ethan's office, her heart pounding, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the exhilaration of finally taking control. As the door clicked shut behind her, she allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. She had done it. She had faced him, and she had made her point clear. Ethan, the man who had once seemed untouchable, was now just another chapter in her past. But even with that victory, Amelia knew this was just the beginning. She wasn't going to let herself get comfortable. This was the moment she had been waiting for, but there were still more battles ahead. As she walked down the hall, her mind was already racing with plans for the future. She had come so far, but there was still so much to do. Her company was growing faster than she had imagined. With the investments she had secured and the deals she had finalized, she was positioning herself to become one of the most powerful women in the business world. But beyond the financial success, Amelia knew what mattered most was her children. Jake and James were her world, and everything she did was for them. She would make sure they never had to experience the pain she had felt. She would give them everything Ethan had promised her and more. As she left the building and stepped into the car waiting for her outside, Amelia looked out the window and allowed herself a brief smile. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it didn't matter. She was stronger than she had ever been, and she had learned the most important lesson of all. Her worth was not defined by anyone but herself. Ethan had walked away from her, but he would soon realize that it was the biggest mistake he could have ever made. She wasn't going to chase after him, and she wasn't going to beg for his approval. Amelia knew that the life she was building for herself was far more meaningful than anything he could offer. She had already built something that Ethan could never take from her. The car sped through the city, and as Amelia watched the world go by, she felt a sense of peace settle in her. She was no longer defined by her past. She was defining her own future. And as her life continued to unfold, one thing was certain: she would never look back. Amelia's life had shifted in ways she never imagined, and as the months passed, she watched her empire grow. She had worked tirelessly to build something that was all her own, a place where she could breathe freely, a place where she could make her own decisions and never be weighed down by the past. She had already achieved so much, but she knew there was still work to be done. The moment she had stepped out of Ethan's office, she had finally closed the door on that chapter of her life. No more would she be the woman waiting for him to come back, waiting for him to acknowledge her. She was done being anyone's second choice. The twins had grown stronger, and with each passing day, they became a symbol of everything Amelia had fought for. Every smile, every laugh, was a reminder that her sacrifices were worth it. Amelia had built a life that was no longer defined by Ethan's choices but by her own. She had learned that the most powerful thing a person could do was take control of their destiny. But with all her progress, she knew that Ethan would eventually come looking for her. His pride had been wounded, and men like him didn't stay down for long. It was only a matter of time before he tried to re-enter her life, hoping to take credit for the success that Amelia had achieved without him. But Amelia was ready. She had anticipated this moment, and had already put a plan in place. She wasn't going to let him back in, at least, not in the way he thought. Ethan had underestimated her from the beginning. He thought she was weak, that she would crumble under the pressure of being left behind. But now, with everything in place, she was the one in control. The phone call came late one evening, as Amelia sat in her study, reviewing paperwork for her next big project. She didn't recognize the number, but she had a feeling she knew who it was. She let the call ring through, but after a few moments, she picked it up. "Amelia!" Ethan's voice came through the speaker, and she could hear the tension in his tone. "I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about," Amelia replied coolly. "I'm doing fine without you, Ethan. You had your chance." "Amelia, I made a mistake," he said, his voice softening. "I know I hurt you, but I want to make things right." "You can't fix this, Ethan," she said firmly. "You made your choice, and now it's time to live with it." She didn't feel anger, just calm resolve. The man who had once held such power over her was now nothing more than a distant memory. He no longer controlled her happiness, her success, or her future. She didn't need him. And she wasn't going to let him back into her life just because he realized too late what he had lost. Ethan had taken his chances, and he had squandered them. She had learned that the only way to truly move forward was to let go of the past. She had to let go of the person she thought he was and accept that the man in front of her now was a stranger. "Amelia, please," he continued, his voice a mix of desperation and regret. "I miss you. I miss us. What you miss is the version of me that you thought you could control," she said, her voice unwavering. "But that person doesn't exist anymore. I've changed, Ethan. And I'm not looking back." There was silence on the other end of the line, and Amelia knew that for the first time in their relationship, she was the one who held all the power. Ethan had thought he could leave her, and she would just pick up the pieces and move on as if nothing had happened. But now, she was the one who had the upper hand. And she was not going to let him take that from her. "Goodbye, Ethan," Amelia said, her voice firm and final. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be with me." She hung up the phone, feeling the weight of the decision lift off her shoulders. As she sat back in her chair, she couldn't help but smile. The future was hers now, and nothing could take that away from her. Amelia leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of the past few weeks lift off her shoulders. The phone call with Ethan had been the final piece in her journey. She had made it clear that she was no longer the woman she had once been. Ethan had underestimated her, thinking that she would fall back into the familiar routine of waiting for him, hoping for his return. But Amelia had learned the most important lesson of all: she didn't need him. She never had. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of success and growth. Her company was thriving, and with each new contract signed and every milestone achieved, Amelia felt more empowered than ever before. She was no longer the woman defined by her marriage or by the man who had left her. She was defining herself, her future, and the future of her children. Jake and James were growing fast, their bright eyes reflecting the strength and resilience that Amelia had cultivated in them. She saw so much of herself in them, their ability to overcome, their determination, and their unwavering belief that anything was possible. Every night, as she tucked them into bed, Amelia made a silent promise to herself. She would always provide them with a life filled with love, security, and the freedom to be whoever they wanted to be. They would never know the pain she had experienced, never feel the sting of abandonment. As the months passed, Amelia's presence in the business world became undeniable. Her name was being mentioned alongside the most successful entrepreneurs, and she had earned the respect of everyone around her. She had built something from nothing, and that was something no one could take away from her. But even with all the success, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something missing. She had achieved everything she had set out to do, except for one thing: Ethan. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about closing the door on that chapter once and for all. She needed to fully move on, to let go of the lingering attachment she still had to him, even after everything. She knew it was time to face the past and truly let it go. Amelia knew that the next step in her journey would be the hardest one yet, confronting the truth about her own heart. She had spent so much time building up walls to protect herself from the hurt Ethan had caused that she had forgotten how to let go of the past. But now, she realized that holding on to it was only keeping her from reaching the next level of her life. It was time to forgive, not for Ethan's sake, but for her own. The weight she had been carrying for so long had to be lifted. As Amelia prepared for what lay ahead, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for years. She had done the work. She had built the life she had always dreamed of, and she had done it all on her own. Ethan was no longer a part of that life, and he never would be again. The door was closed, and Amelia was free. Free to embrace the future, free to build even greater things, and free to give her children the life they deserved. The road ahead was hers to walk, and she knew she would walk it with confidence, strength, and an unwavering belief in herself. Amelia sat at her desk late one evening, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the piles of paperwork in front of her. It had been several months since her conversation with Ethan, and yet it felt like a lifetime ago. She had truly put the past behind her. Her business was thriving, her children were happy, and most importantly, she had finally found peace within herself. But as she reviewed the latest financial reports, a small voice in her head reminded her that her journey was not complete. She had built an empire, but there was still one thing left to do: ensure that Ethan could never disrupt her life again. As successful as she had become, there was something about the thought of him that still lingered. Not in a way that weakened her, but in a way that made her realize how much she had outgrown him. Amelia had risen above the hurt, but the lingering resentment she had towards Ethan needed to be addressed once and for all. She knew she couldn't truly move on until she confronted the last vestiges of the life they had shared. Her decision was clear. She would meet with him again. Not for answers, not for apologies, but for closure. Amelia had spent so long building her strength that she had forgotten the importance of truly letting go. She had grown to realize that holding on to the past, even the parts that hurt the most, was just a barrier to her future. It was time to break that barrier once and for all. She scheduled the meeting for the following week. No more games, no more wondering if she still had feelings for him. This meeting would be the final chapter in her story with Ethan, and she was going to write the ending on her own terms. When the day of the meeting arrived, Amelia felt nothing but calm. She was no longer the woman who feared the unknown, who felt small in the face of rejection. She had built her own life, and she had no intention of letting anyone, especially Ethan, dictate her worth. Ethan was waiting in the same luxurious office, the one where they had once made all their plans for the future. But this time, it was different. This time, the future was hers alone. As she entered the room, she saw Ethan standing by the window, looking out at the city. He turned as she entered, and for a moment their eyes met. Amelia could see the change in him, the regret in his gaze. But she didn't care. She had no room in her heart for that anymore. She was done with the past. "Amelia," Ethan said, his voice soft. "I'm glad you came." She nodded but didn't respond right away. She had nothing to say that hadn't already been said. "I know I hurt you," he continued. "And I can't take that back. I was wrong, and I regret everything." Amelia looked at him with a steady gaze. "Ethan, it doesn't matter anymore," she said, her voice firm. "I don't need your apology. I don't need anything from you. What we had is over, and I'm fine with that. I've built my life, and I've built it on my own terms." There was a brief silence between them, and for a moment, Amelia saw the weight of his choices in his eyes. But she wasn't interested in his regret. She had outgrown him. "I'm not here to rehash the past," Amelia continued. "I'm here to tell you that I've moved on. And it's time for you to do the same. I won't be dragged back into a life that no longer fits me. I'm better than that." Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but Amelia raised her hand, stopping him. "No, Ethan. I've heard enough. I've spent years wondering why you left, but I don't wonder anymore. It's not important. What matters now is that I'm free. Free of you, free of your control, and free of the idea that I ever needed you. I don't." She stood up, her back straight, her heart full of conviction. "I'm not angry anymore," she said, her voice calm but powerful. "But I'm done. And I'm finally at peace." Ethan didn't speak again. He simply watched as Amelia walked out of the room, her head held high. She didn't need his approval, his validation, or his apology. Amelia had found her strength long ago, and now, she was walking into a future that was all her own. Weeks passed since Amelia's final conversation with Ethan, and a new sense of peace began to settle over her. She had once been consumed by thoughts of what might have been, the unanswered questions and lingering pain of betrayal. But now she was free. Free to live her life on her own terms, free to pursue the dreams she had put on hold for far too long. Her company was flourishing, her children were thriving, and she had finally found her balance. Amelia no longer looked at her life through the lens of loss. She saw it as a story of transformation, of rising from the ashes of her past and building something beautiful. Every day was a reminder that she was the author of her own fate, and she had no intention of letting anyone rewrite her narrative. The twins, Jake and James, were the heart of everything she did. They were her inspiration, her motivation, and her reason for waking up each morning with a smile. She had promised them a life filled with love, security, and possibility, and she was determined to keep that promise. As they grew older, Amelia watched them develop their own personalities, strong, curious, and full of ambition. She saw herself in them, the same fire in their eyes that had fueled her own journey. She couldn't help but feel proud of the life she had created for them, and for herself. It wasn't just about the financial success or the recognition she had earned. It was about the freedom to be herself, without anyone's expectations or judgments weighing her down. One evening, as Amelia sat in her study, reviewing the next steps for her growing business, her phone buzzed on the desk. She didn't recognize the number, but something told her it was important. With a deep breath, she answered. "Hello? Amelia," a familiar voice said, sending a chill down her spine. It was Ethan. "I've been trying to reach you." Amelia's heart didn't race. She had moved past the fear and anger she once felt toward him. What is it, Ethan? She asked calmly. There was a long pause before he spoke again. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to say, I've been watching what you've done. I see how far you've come, and I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud of you. Amelia remained silent for a moment, her mind processing his words. She had spent so many years waiting for him to see her, to recognize her worth. But now, she didn't need his approval. Thank you, she replied, her voice steady. But you don't need to say that to me. I've built my life on my own, Ethan. I don't need your validation. There was another silence, but this time, it wasn't filled with the weight of unresolved emotions. It was simply a space where both of them had come to terms with the past. I understand, Ethan said quietly. I just wanted you to know that I regret the way things ended. I wish I could have been the man you needed me to be. Amelia felt a sense of finality in his words, but there was no bitterness in her heart. She had already forgiven him, not for his sake, but for hers. I appreciate that, she said. But the person I am today is because of everything I've been through. I wouldn't change a thing. As she hung up the phone, Amelia sat back in her chair and closed her eyes for a moment. She had never expected an apology, and she had never needed one. But hearing those words from Ethan, however late they came, gave her a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. She had spent so much time carrying the weight of their past, but now, it was gone. The life she had built for herself and her children was all that mattered. She had turned her pain into power, and now, there was nothing left to hold her back. Amelia opened her eyes, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. The future was wide open, and she was ready for whatever came next. She had already won. Amelia stood in front of her full-length mirror, adjusting the sleeves of her blouse as she prepared for another busy day ahead. The reflection staring back at her was different from the woman she had been a year ago. Gone was the sadness, the uncertainty. In her place was someone who had not only survived but thrived. The twins, Jake and James, were playing in the next room, their laughter filling the house with warmth. They had become her anchor, the driving force behind everything she had done. Amelia had built a life for them, and it was everything she had promised herself it would be, filled with love, stability, and opportunity. Her business continued to grow, gaining recognition and respect in the industry. People no longer saw her as just the wife of a millionaire, but as a powerful force in her own right. She had done it all on her own, and that feeling of accomplishment was something no one could take away from her. She thought back to the early days when everything seemed so uncertain. The pain of Ethan's betrayal had once felt unbearable, but now it seemed like a distant memory. She had learned the hardest lessons in those moments, about herself, about love, and about strength. Ethan had walked away from her and their children, thinking he could replace her with someone younger, someone more beautiful. But he had underestimated her, and he had underestimated what she was capable of. Amelia had rebuilt everything from scratch, and now she stood at the top, stronger than ever before. She had her own identity, her own future, and that was more than enough. As she finished getting ready, Amelia checked her phone. There was an email from one of her top clients, confirming the final details of an upcoming project. It was a huge win for her company, and it was just the latest in a string of successes. The day was shaping up to be productive, and Amelia knew that it was just another step forward in her journey. She grabbed her purse, gave the twins one last kiss, and headed out the door. The world was waiting for her, and she was ready to take it on. As the day unfolded, Amelia's mind stayed sharp. Every decision, every conversation, was a reflection of the woman she had become. No longer did she second-guess herself or seek validation from others. She knew who she was, and she knew exactly what she wanted. Ethan's call had given her closure, but it had also solidified her resolve. She no longer needed him to define her. She was her own person, and she was making her mark. By the end of the day, Amelia had secured another deal, cementing her reputation as a fierce businesswoman. She was building her legacy, one success at a time. As she looked at her phone once more, she couldn't help but smile. She had done it. She had built a future for herself and her children, one that was free of the shadows of the past. The future was bright, and Amelia knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same strength and determination that had brought her this far. Amelia stood on the balcony of her apartment, overlooking the city as the sun began to set. The golden light cast a warm glow on the skyline, but it was the peace she felt that struck her the most. It had been a journey, a long one, full of unexpected twists and moments of growth. Yet here she was, stronger, wiser, and in control of her own future. She had spent years building this life, brick by brick, and every day, it became clearer that the struggles of the past had been worth it. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her own strength, and in doing so, she had created something that was entirely hers. Her children, Jake and James, were her world, and she knew she had given them a life that was filled with love, stability, and endless possibilities. As they grew older, Amelia could see their potential. Both of them showed signs of becoming as strong and determined as she was. They were her legacy, and she was proud of everything she had done to ensure that their future would be bright. Work had never felt like work anymore. It was her passion, and it was the outlet through which she proved to herself and to the world that she could be more than just someone's wife. She could be an entrepreneur, a leader, and a mother who never gave up. The phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her from her thoughts. She pulled it out, and saw a message from her father. "Amelia, I'm so proud of you. Keep going, keep fighting. You've already proven that there's no limit to what you can achieve." Her father's words always had a way of making her feel grounded. He had been her guiding force, helping her navigate the toughest moments and giving her the confidence to chase her dreams. And now, seeing the results of her hard work, she knew that she had made him proud. But the work wasn't over. Amelia had learned long ago that success was not a destination but a journey. She had already accomplished so much, but there was always more to do, more lives to impact, and more challenges to face. Her business was expanding, her influence was growing, and she had an opportunity to help others who had been in her shoes, others who needed someone to show them that they too could rise above. As the days went on, Amelia focused not only on her company but also on the things that truly mattered, the moments with her children, the relationships she had built, and the people who supported her along the way. Every success, every milestone, was a reflection of her unwavering determination and her belief in herself. But with everything she had accomplished, she never forgot where she had started. She never forgot the pain, the heartbreak, and the lessons learned along the way. It had all been part of her journey, and without it, she wouldn't be the person she was today. Ethan was a distant memory now, his presence in her life nothing more than a fleeting chapter. She had forgiven him, not for his sake but for hers. Holding on to anger had only kept her from moving forward, and now, she had freed herself from that weight. The future was hers. And as Amelia looked out over the city, she knew that whatever came next, she would face it head-on, just as she had faced everything else. There was no limit to what she could achieve, and this was only the beginning. As Amelia stood in her office, reviewing the latest progress of her company, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. It seemed like just yesterday she had been struggling with the pain of Ethan's departure, wondering how she would ever recover. But now, here she was, standing tall, stronger than ever, and in control of her own destiny. Her business was flourishing, her children were thriving, and her future was bright. She had created something beautiful from the wreckage of her past, and she was proud of everything she had accomplished. She had not only built a successful company, but she had built a life that was truly hers, a life that was no longer defined by anyone else. The phone buzzed on her desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from her father, a simple note that made her smile. "I'm proud of you. Keep going." Those words meant everything to her. Her father had always been her rock, the one person who believed in her when no one else did. And now, as she looked around at the life she had created, she knew that he was proud of her too. The twins, Jake and James, were growing up fast, and every day, she saw the strength and determination she had worked so hard to instill in them. They were her greatest accomplishment, and she knew that they would grow up to be even stronger than she had been. Amelia was teaching them, not just through words, but through actions. She had shown them what it meant to persevere, to rise above challenges, and to never give up on themselves. She smiled as she thought about them. They were the light of her life, and everything she did was for them. As the months went by, Amelia's company continued to expand, reaching new heights and gaining more recognition in the industry. She had become a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had defied the odds and built a legacy. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her own instincts, and to never let anyone define her worth. But as much as she had accomplished, Amelia knew that the journey was far from over. There would always be more challenges, more opportunities, and more room to grow. She was ready for whatever came next. And this time, she would face it on her own terms. The past was behind her, and the future was hers to shape. As she looked out the window at the city below, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had built a life that was truly hers, a life filled with love, strength, and endless possibility. She had proven to herself, and to the world, that she was capable of achieving anything she set her mind to. And as she looked at the twins, her heart swelled with pride. They were her greatest gift, and she knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The journey had been long, but it had been worth every step. Amelia had created her own story, and it was one she could be proud of.